Alright, so as the title says, we're back with yet another book review, which I'm not sure anybody's asking for these, but maybe it's just my way of digesting all this information or, unloading it after I read these books, which I've been reading a lot lately, I guess. I had a lot more free time. So, this time around, it is, of course, by Seth Rogan. The title is Yearbook, and I thought it was good. I liked it. Seth Rogan is somebody I've always enjoyed his work. Like, I've always enjoyed his movies. I see his tweets from time to time. He's making vases. I like his artwork. So I'm not sure how much of a say he had in the artwork for the book, like the cover and everything, but we'll talk about that. So how do I feel about this from an aesthetic level? How's it going to look on your bookshelf when people come over and you're like, oh yeah, I read that Seth Rogan book? I think it looks pretty good, honestly. Colors stand out. It's got a cool art style going on. Titled Yearbook, and you got this little like yearbook picture frame going on. You got the stuff on the side, information. But you have this sleeve that you can take off, and then you get a bunch of portraits done in an abstract style, which I like the artwork. It's like simple, abstract, like I said, and it contains portraits of a bunch of people that he has stories about, like a tiger. I'm not sure who a lot of these people are. One of them is supposed to be George Lucas, maybe him or him. And then on the back, you got like Kanye, Ali G, his parents, I believe. He took a bunch of mushrooms in Paris, so that's there, of course, too. But I think it looks good. Like, this will look good on a bookshelf. The color stands out, and yeah, it's interesting. So, what about the contents of the book? What kind of stories can we expect? It's a lot of stories about his life, I think starting around the time he was like 13 or so, and then moving forward. And of course he talks about a lot of the movies he's made, but I'll get to that a little bit later. First I want to talk about how it kind of starts out, which, like I said, I think it starts out when he's about 13 years old and covers a lot, like a lot of the book. Big chunk of it is going to be when he's in high school and around that age. And, being Seth Rogan, there's a lot of talk about marijuana, shrooms, acid, things like that, which are pretty funny. He's got some drug deals, actually, that went south. And one of the most interesting stories or, like, facts that you take away from this book is he actually started doing stand-up when he was 13. Or maybe it was 14. I think it was 13, though. And there's a lot of interesting dynamics that surround that, which I won't give away because you should read the book yourself if you're interested, of course. And yeah, so that makes for a lot of interesting stories. Also, of course, he's famous, so he's been in a lot of these movies. He talks about things like Superbad behind the scenes, which isn't, that hard of information to find. It's kind of public knowledge. A lot of it was based on real life stories that happened to Seth in high school and his friend groups. They even tried to name a lot of the characters after real life people, I think. But apart from that, what other movies does he talk about? He talks about The Green Hornet. There's a big section about The Interview, which, had a lot of controversy surrounding it, which, I remember the controversy that was happening with theaters not wanting to play it. But there's a lot of backstory that he gives and context that he shows off to the reader, describes to the reader, and that is a lot of information I didn't know existed. So I thought reading about that was really interesting because I do remember everything that surrounded it back then. But they also talk about, like there's a tiger right here, and behind the scenes with the tiger handler and everything that went into that day of filming or that night of filming. He talks about Kanye pulling him aside and having him listen to music in his van outside. Getting advice from Sacha Baron Cohen, aka Ali G. Bunch of other stories though. The dude's famous, so he's been all over the place. There's a crazy Nicolas Cage story, which I think that's supposed to be Nick Cage. And obviously the mushroom, like I said, there's a lot of drug related stories. Bad drug deals, like I mentioned earlier, something that took place while he was in high school. And then he goes to Paris at one point, takes a ton of mushrooms, gets really high, and yeah, he just talks about, like, there's definitely enough content in his life to make, crazy stories or, a really interesting book of just like stories from his life, which that's what this is. And it's interesting. He could write another book, I'm sure, of more stuff that's happened to him because, he's Seth Rogan. So how does the writing stack up? I think it's pretty good. I'm not, very critical, I don't think. I had some critiques on the last book review that we did, but this one, the only thing that I think is kind of taking away from the book being better are there's some jokes that he makes. Maybe it's like a pun or something where he'll be talking about a situation and then try to give it a funny name, and then he'll talk about it after, like right after that, he'll say something like, that's still a workshop, or he carries it on a little too long. It's like when somebody tells you a joke and then explains the joke, which makes it less funny. Usually, I mean, there's some cases where that like self-awareness is in an ironic way to make it more funny, I think. Maybe that's the right way of explaining it. Maybe I'm doing a bad way of explaining this, which makes it not funny. But it wasn't supposed to be a joke anyway. But yeah, there are a couple instances in the book where he says things like that, and then of those instances, there are a couple that you just kind of read and you're like, this really didn't need to be there. Kind of takes away from what's going on, like the story he's telling, and he does this aside to try to make a joke, I guess. But yeah, so at the end of the day, would I recommend this? And the answer is yes. I liked it. I thought it was good. A lot of interesting stories, like I said. Some of the writing could have been, I don't know, workshopped a little bit more to make it better. There's some pictures. The words are also, you know, like the font size is a decent size, I guess. So it's a pretty easy read, in my opinion, from someone who doesn't read a whole lot. And as far as the length, I think it's 260 pages exactly. So it's not that bad. I liked it. I enjoyed it. A lot of interesting things I learned about Seth Rogan. And kind of interesting, something that I expected there would have been maybe more of, is talk about James Franco. There's a little bit of talk about James Franco since they're so close, or they were so close. I know James Franco had that like controversy that came out, and they kind of split ways, or Seth Rogan hasn't really associated himself with him as much because of that controversy, which makes sense. So I'm guessing that's probably why he didn't talk so much about James Franco in the book, or, you know, maybe their friendship is more of just something that's under the public spotlight, and these friendships that Seth has with other people behind the scenes that we don't see on camera are, you know, his true friends. So maybe that's how it is. I don't know. I enjoyed the book. Let me know if you guys enjoy this video and want more book reviews. I don't know. Even if you do want more book reviews, I might not I might not make the videos, because I'd have to read books for that to happen, and it honestly doesn't happen too much. Just so enjoy these book reviews while they last, and that's all I have to say about Seth Rogan's Yearbook.